What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another weekly update. So there's lots of news to go over, but briefly I first want to give a little channel update. And the main thing is that I was at the WAPA rally yesterday, and I do this every year where I drive all the newest stuff, but only for about 15 or 20 minutes, so it's not enough time to do full reviews on them. So I just do little quick drive videos that are usually about 7 minutes or so, just giving my first initial impressions, kind of a quick overview of a vehicle instead of an in-depth review. And those have been really popular in the past few years that I've done them, but unlike the previous years, I used to do like 3 a day, and I would, just bombard everyone's sub boxes for a few days. I'm instead gonna spread them out. I think I have 8 videos this year that I filmed, and I'm gonna do 1 each day throughout all the days where I don't normally have videos. So I'll still have a normal weekly update next Friday. Still will do a normal review next Wednesday, I think, but then all the other days I'm gonna have daily uploads here with these quick drive videos for about the next week or so. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this. I got to drive some really cool stuff this year. Finally got to do the Genesis G70, the new Altima, and several others. So you guys hopefully will enjoy that, and please tune in for those. But anyway, getting into the news for this week, lots of interesting stuff to go over here. The first story that's potentially very exciting is Bozy Tatarovic wrote a story for Jalopnik this past week, reporting that Ford is supposedly working with GetRag to develop a new 7-speed manual transmission, supposedly called the MT88. So those of you that are Mustang owners or enthusiasts know, MT82 is the current manual transmission in the current Mustang, and so MT88 almost sounds like a variation on that, or a next-gen version of that. But according to Bozy's sources here, this transmission is first gonna appear in the 2020 Bronco, and then it'll probably be connected to a 2.7 liter EcoBoost V6, and the Bronco might have other motors, but I think that's just kind of like the main one they're thinking right now. But it's also likely that it will appear in the next gen Mustang in 2021 or 2022. Just because, especially if Ford wants to keep the V8 alive, one way to boost that, MPG rating, especially on the highway, is to have a 7th gear. It worked out well for the Corvette and the 911. They both have 7-speed manuals. I don't think it takes away from the experience or anything, and will only be good news for the Mustang if they want to keep, the good fuel economy numbers. That could also allow them to have shorter gearing for, 1st through 5th or something like that. Because like in my Bullet, the gearing is a little taller, and they did that to try and I think get better fuel economy. And so it'd be nice if they shorten up those gears a little bit, and have that 7th gear there for cruising. And anyway, as far as the Bronco, going back to that, there's a rumor it could debut at the Detroit Auto Show in January. That sounds a little soon to me, since we haven't even seen any camouflaged prototypes of it running around. So far, they've just been like Explorer-based mules or Everest-based mules. The Everest is in Australia. And so, it could be a little while longer before we see this, but if it comes in Detroit, that would be great. So anyway, cool to hear that. Speaking of manuals and Ford SUVs, though, during the Ford Edge ST media drive, which was just happening in the past week or two, Motor Trend asked Ford's chief functional engineer if he thought there was room for an Edge RS in the lineup. Since, we know the cars are dying off at Ford, is there any hope of any kind of RS for SUVs, since there's high-performance SUVs from other companies and stuff? And so the engineer responded that, of course, this is all hypothetical. I don't think they even are planning anything yet. But, engineers dream too, and I think he kind of has an idea of what he would like to do. He mentioned more aggressive tire and suspension setup, of course, active dampers, torque vectoring, and more power is always something that would come with an RS. Motor Trend possibly, they suggested possibly having the 3.5 liter EcoBoost V6 that's in the Raptor, that tuned for 450 horsepower in an Edge. Would be pretty cool for an Edge RS. But interestingly, the engineer actually also brought up the idea of manual enthusiasts and how they're a very strong voice, and and Ford's kind of saying they're a friend of the manual. They are keeping it alive in the Mustang. It was the only transmission available for the ST Focus, Fiesta, and the Focus RS. And so I think they're kind of gauging interest supposedly to see if this segment really requires a manual, potentially either for an ST version of the Edge that could come later, or for an RS version of the Edge possibly to have a manual too. So I think they're going to kind of just have to study what Focus RS owners want, and whenever they're buying a new car in 3 to 5 years or something, what do they want? Do they want an SUV? If so, do they want it to have a manual? And I think they're going to try and do some research to see. But it shows that at least it's potentially on the table at Ford to continue on with manuals, even if it's not in cars, which would be cool. You know, if you have the Bronco with a manual, you have the Edge maybe with a performance version having a manual, it'd be great to help keep the excitement alive a little bit so that you don't have the manual just relegated to the Mustang and nothing else within Ford. So that's promising. We'll have to see, if that actually turns out. But anyway, cool to see that. Autoblog this past week is reporting that Volkswagen is supposedly going to be pricing their electric cars very, very similar to their diesels before the whole Dieselgate thing happened. So they want to have just a slight increase over the gas version, but not by much, according to a Volkswagen board member for e-mobility. And so he said the small ID hatchback, which supposedly now is rumored to be called the Neo. I hadn't heard that name until this report, but it could be the Volkswagen Neo is what they'd be calling it. It'd be kind of a golf-sized thing. But the interesting thing, so the pricing would be a little complex, but to simplify it, he says they would want it that Neo to be about $8,000 less than a Tesla Model 3, which would put it around $27,000 bucks. But Autoblog continued by analyzing Volkswagen's diesel pricing before Dieselgate and found that a Jetta, like a diesel Jetta back in 2015, was about $2,600 more than a regular gas version. So $2,600 more for an electric version would be completely reasonable. And other Volkswagens, it's not quite that small. Sometimes it's a 7% increase. Sometimes it's more like a 9% increase. But still, pretty small increase compared to other electric versions of other vehicles. We're seeing stuff like the Audi e-tron and all these things are, going for way more than a comparable SUV that's gas, So that would be pretty cool if they can actually bring it to market for that small of an increase. They might lose money at first, but, could turn them into the people's electric car, which would be very cool considering Volkswagen's history. But they also said they're going to price them based on interior size. So in this report, Autoblog was talking about how supposedly like the ID Cross, which is the electric crossover, although it'll be the size of a Tiguan, because you don't have all the engines and powertrain stuff, it'll actually have the interior volume of an Atlas in a Tiguan package. So they would probably price it like an Atlas, even though outside on the exterior, it's the size of a Tiguan. So that might throw consumers off a little bit, but hopefully once they actually sit inside and realize how roomy it is and that they don't need a huge vehicle to have huge interior space in an electric car, then maybe that's something they would be willing to pay for. But that's the only stumbling block I can see here with that pricing strategy is people are saying, well, I can get this huge Atlas instead for the same money at this smaller, electric thing. But if you sit in both, it should be, very favorable. So anyway, interesting to hear that. And it also, is more compelling considering they're building this Electrify America network with thousands of charging stations. And if they have that established and then you have these, electric vehicles for $3,000 more than a gas version, I think you would see a lot of people make the switch. And so anyway, interesting to see that. Other electrified news is Jeep has officially announced now that the Renegade will be getting a plug-in hybrid version and it'll be on the market by early 2020, FCA says. So we already had seen spy photos of a plug-in hybrid Renegade that was running around, and so we knew it was probably coming, but this makes it official, so cool to see that. Other electrified news is Israel has actually announced this past week that they're banning gasoline and diesel engines and the sale of new vehicles with those engines in 2030, completely banning it in a push to get the entire country into electric vehicles. Now, of course, you'll still be able to buy used vehicles in 2030 with gas engines and stuff, but they're really trying to push their whole country into that, which is really crazy. So far we've had, I think London has announced a ban, and a few, I think Paris and a few others, I think somewhere between 2030 and 2040, but some of those might even get moved up and more aggressive because this announcement came shortly after there was the United Nations report this past week on climate change, saying that drastic changes need to be made by 2030, otherwise we'll miss the target and there could be some further catastrophes and more heat waves that are really getting worse and deadly and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into all those details as far as the report or anything, but I think that will motivate a lot of car companies and a lot of governments to maybe be even more aggressive with the electrification plan than they already are planning to be. So we'll have to just wait and see how that pans out and how people and companies react to this news. But Anyway, crazy to hear about Israel, though. The entire country, that's I think the first time an entire country is banning gas engines so far. In other futuristic news, though, Mercedes, their new CEO spoke with Automotive News this past week at the Paris Auto Show, and he revealed that the next-gen S-Class that's coming in 2020 will get Mercedes' first use of Level 3 autonomous tech. So level 3 is where you can take your hands off the steering wheel and leave them off the steering wheel, and you can take your eyes off the road and leave them off the road, but you still have to be ready to take over, which is kind of a catch-22, because if you're not looking at the road and you're not holding onto the steering wheel, if the thing's like, hurry up and take control, like, there's no way you're going to be prepared. I mean, they even said, supposedly if you text, you don't resume full attention on the road even after looking away from your phone for another like 30 seconds. So I really think it actually could lead to more accidents unless these systems are really good about giving you a full minute or something before you actually have to fully take over or something. We'll have to see how it all pans out, but I mean, they're still a little bit behind even Audi, who already has this tech in the all-new 2019 A8 that's arriving soon. Although Audi's only selling it in Germany with this technology, because they say there's other regulatory issues and other issues with Americans and other countries as far as adopting this tech and becoming too reliant on it and stuff. So they're only keeping it for Germany right now. But I'm sure that'll spread, especially if they want to beat Mercedes and BMW to the punch of Level 3 autonomy. So anyway, crazy to hear that. Speaking of regulatory holdups, though, some good news here. The NHTSA is just our national, Center for Highway Safety and stuff. They're working towards changing the laws regarding adaptive driving beams, is what they call them. After a study by the IIHS found a 56% increase in nighttime pedestrian deaths from 2009 to 2016. So that's a big jump of a lot more people dying at night. They're walking. And so they're saying that's what's motivating them to get these new headlights approved and allow companies to have these more advanced headlights, because in other places, like in Germany and other countries, you're allowed to have these laser headlights like BMW and Audi and a few others have, and they're very intelligent about illuminating the road very, very well and the surroundings very well. But when it sees an oncoming car, it'll dim just that part, since it's laser light. It's very, very precise, so they can specialize on just whatever it is they want to illuminate, and that's very cool. And so finally, our government here is allowing this. It sounds like they're taking the steps to open this up, and so that's something they're actually working towards now. So hopefully we'll start being able to have all these very sweet headlamps in the next year or two. It'd be nice. So anyway, cool to see that. And moving on to a few truck stories this past week. First is Ram was spied testing a new Rebel model that's rumored to be called the TR. And so this Rebel TR would be a step down from the Hellcat-powered Ram TRX or T-Rex that has been rumored to be coming to production in the next couple of years here. But this would be a more powerful version in between those two, in between like the Rebel's regular 5.7 liter Hemi and the T-Rex version. So the TR is going to be supposedly a naturally aspirated 7-liter V8 engine that's going to be called the Banshee motor, and is a bored-out version of the 6.4-liter, essentially, Hemi. And so the spy photographer said there wasn't any kind of supercharger whine, so that's why they're thinking this is the 7-liter. It still is possible they're just throwing the 6.4-liter in there as well. That would certainly be possible. But this 7-liter that's been rumored to be under development supposedly makes 520 horsepower, 525 pound-feet of torque, and supposedly this TR model is going to be debuting in 2020 as a 2021 model year vehicle. So cool to see that. Ford has also revealed their numbers on the 2019 Ford Ranger as far as horsepower and all its capabilities and stuff. So it's going to be going on sale here, and I think they said by the end of the year. So this is coming very quickly. We already had pricing, and you can already go on the configurator on Ford's site to build one and figure out how much one would cost the way you want it to be. But anyway, we already know they're all going to get the 2.3 liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder is the only engine currently offered, and in the Ranger application, it only does 270 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. So not only is that less horsepower than the Mustang has, it has 310 in the Mustang, 320 pound-feet of torque, but it's also less than the V6 competition. And I know this is a 4-cylinder in the Ranger, but they're pricing it like a V6 because the power is similar to the V6 offerings, but it is a little bit less as far as horsepower goes. Now, when you look at the torque, it has more torque than all the V6 offerings and all the other trucks in this segment, unless you get the diesel Colorado. That has more torque thanks to it being diesel. Payload is going to be 1,860 pounds, which is nearly 300 pounds more than most of the competitors with their V6. And you can tow 7,500 pounds here with the Ranger, which again is best in segment unless you go for the diesel Colorado. And so, yeah, it sounds like it's going to be pretty compelling here since it's just slightly under the pricing of the V6 versions and gives you a lot for the money, it sounds like, for those who want that truck capability there. So cool to see that. Chevy has also released their fuel economy numbers for their 2.7 liter turbocharged four-cylinder that's going to be in the new 2019 Silverado. So they announced it's going to get 20 miles per gallon in the city, 23 on the highway, and a combined rating of 21. So these are pretty small improvements, considering the 5.3 liter V8 engine only does 3 mpg worse in the city, only 2 worse combined, and actually gets the same highway numbers as the four-cylinder. I think partially because that V8 can go into a cylinder deactivation four-cylinder mode on the highway, and so that's why they get identical highway fuel economy. So, I mean, it's still more powerful and fuel efficient than the base engines in the F-150 and the Ram. So from that perspective, you're getting a little bit of an improvement. But I still don't know why people just wouldn't go for the V8. I mean, aside, even with Ford's EcoBoost, I mean, if you're very gentle with your throttle applications, you can hit those numbers. But in my experience with the F-150 I had a few months ago, I was still well under the MPG estimates with just, I mean, those turbos get really thirsty and suck down the gas just as fast as a V8 if you're heavy on the throttle, and sometimes even quicker than a V8 does. So, we'll have to see in reality what the actual numbers are, and once people start driving these. But anyway, interesting to see that. Other GM truck news is there's a new rumor about the GMC Sierra's inline 6 diesel engine that GMC already confirmed it's getting, but they haven't announced any kind of numbers yet. And so there's supposedly some leaked numbers from a GM Canada document that a TFL truck found. And so the engine is supposedly, it's a 3 liter and will supposedly do 282 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque, which would be more powerful than the F-150's new diesel by 32 horsepower and 10 pound-feet of torque. So those numbers sound accurate, but there's stuff that's a little iffy in this leaked document because it says it'll only tow 7,800 pounds, which if you remember is only 300 pounds more than the Ranger I just mentioned, and we're talking about the full-size Sierra here. And considering the diesel F-150 tows 11,400 pounds, 7,800 pounds out of the diesel Sierra, even though it is a smaller inline 6, would still be pretty underwhelming. So I'm not sure if all these numbers are finalized just yet. But anyway, it also gives MPG numbers and says, at least for Canada, it's going to get 2 MPG lower than the F-150 on the highway. But yeah, none of this is finalized. We do know the Silverado will most likely get this engine as well, but we'll have to wait for all the official details on that. But anyway, interesting to hear nonetheless. And some other GM news, Opel has announced that Opel's not part of GM anymore. They were sold off a little while ago, and now they're owned by Peugeot and Citroën. They're like conglomerate there. But anyway, Opel's announced they're killing off the Cascada for by the end of next year. And so they're built in Poland, and that's also where they built the Buick version of the Cascada. And so that means that almost certainly by the end of next year, that will also be killed off as well. Which is kind of a shame, because I had a Buick Cascada for a week as a press vehicle, and although the interior was really dated and a little bit of a mess, it was still a cool offering. The Buick just offered a convertible. I do see a few driving around my area. They seem to be fairly well liked. They didn't sell in huge numbers ever, but still was just cool that Buick offered a convertible. And so for that reason, I'm sad to see it most likely leaving us relatively soon. And just a week after the official reveal of the 3 Series, the 2019 version of the BMW 3 Series, we have some patent renderings of a wagon version, speaking of other cool offerings, that have leaked out here and were shared by Jalopnik. And so it looks exactly like you'd expect the wagon version to look, but it's interesting that it's only pictured with the standard bumpers that you get on like the 330 models, and not the M Sport ones. So I'm hoping there'll still be an M Sport wagon, but who knows at this point, and not sure if they'll even bring this to the States or not. I think we still do get the wagons now, but that's anyone's guess at this point since they don't sell very well here. And as we established last week, even if we do get a wagon, it's very unlikely it'll get a manual anymore like you used to be able to get in those, although, and that also probably applies to Europe as well, unless there's a base model wagon, since we know the base model over in Europe does get a manual transmission option. So we'll have to see, but anyway, interesting to see the wagon there. Speaking of BMW though, we have a follow-up story on on the Supra this week, thanks to some digging by Bozy Tatarovic of Jalopnik, who found the parts catalog for the Supra, and I think this was in like BMW system or something. But anyway, it shows that all the parts from this, nearly all the parts from the Supra come from BMW. Everything from the engine, transmission, all the way to the door locks, window motors, all that stuff comes from other BMW. So this is really a parts bin special. As much as I'm very excited for the Supra still, but I was hoping there would be a little bit more Toyota content, considering Toyota is the more reliable of the two companies. But anyway, so here's just a few of the things. You can read Bozy's full article for all the details if you'd like. I retweeted it on Twitter. You can go check that out if you're curious. But anyway, some of the highlights here. The suspension is very similar to a 5 Series. For example, he noted here. The HVAC system for the heating and cooling comes from the X3 and the X4. Even the mirrors, the side mirrors come from the X2, just with different covers on them. And there's a few exceptions that are somewhat unique to the Supra. For example, the seats are customized to be super specific, but they also use BMW internals for many of the parts. And another thing is the engine is actually almost identical to the one in the X5, actually, but it does have a unique oil pump and a unique turbo. So, I mean, a turbo is a large change, and so that will hopefully give it much different driving dynamics than an X5 engine. But it still is just, a lot of this stuff it's really coming down to a few unique tweaks by Toyota and badging, and then suspension tuning and tuning of the ECU and stuff, and that's basically it. So it's turning out to be a little bit different than I think everyone was expecting the Supra to be. And again, I'm going to reserve judgment until it's fully revealed. We have all the specs and actually drive them and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we'll just move on from that. But unfortunately, more BMW parts sharing. I swear, BMW must be trying to take over the world, or they just have really good stuff and everyone else wants it. It's one or the other. Anyway, there's a new rumor going around. This is just a rumor, thankfully for now, in Car Magazine about the next-gen Jaguar F-Type. And I love the F-Type. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know the F-Type is near and dear to my heart. I still want one someday. And so this report's a little concerning because it's reporting that Jaguar is potentially working on a partnership with BMW for engines, and that would first be shown in the F-Type, according to this rumor. So, according to the writer George Kasher, this is supposedly codenamed internally by Jaguar as Project Jennifer, and it's a version of the 4.4-liter twin-turbo V8 from the M5, which is a sweet motor. I mean, you just probably saw my M5 review. Amazing engine, amazing. But does it sound as good as the F-Type's V8? No, not even close. And that's my main concern. But anyway, moving on with this report. It said, it does already 600 horsepower in the M5, so that'd be a nice improvement even from the 575 in the SVR. But again, how much horsepower does an F-Type really need? I mean, yes, we all 1,000 horsepower everything's, but why? It's one of those things I would almost rather see them carry the engines over just because they sound so good. If it's not broke, don't fix it. That's just my opinion on that. But anyway, so some other stuff here, is they're just going to be using this first in the F-Type, but this could also spread to, of course, all the other Jaguar and Land Rover products, as I think they're trying to wean people out of that V8 that they have currently. But they can't just ditch the V8 altogether because a lot of their customers really want that, in the Range Rovers especially and stuff. But they say it's supposedly, according to this report, it's too expensive to build and to develop a new V8 engine just for themselves. That would be something that would sell in very small numbers because there's less and less people going for that V8 still. And this is getting more and more common. We already have Aston Martin buying V8 engines off of Mercedes-Benz, and there's lots of partnering going on, especially these smaller car companies that maybe can't afford to do the R&D required. And so if this is the only option to keep a V8 is to use a BMW one, I guess that's fine. And hopefully the Jaguar engineers can find a way to amplify the sound and make it sound better than BMW engineers have so far. But anyway, I even think, my personal thing as an aside is if they want to use a BMW engine, why not go to the E-Type's roots, which is what the F-Type's inspired by? That had an inline 6. why not? I mean, those are getting more and more popular with, Mercedes reintroducing one. BMW, if they want to work with BMW, still has those inline sixes. I really don't want them to just use the Supra motor, which is also in the Z4, but something like that would fit very well in an F-Type and give you a sound that's, a little closer to, what you would expect out of an F-Type, I think, than what you get from that V8. But, I don't know. That's just a little conjecture on my part. Other stuff here in regards to this rumor and this report is that the next-gen F-Type supposedly is also going to get a 2+2 configuration with tiny little back seats in an attempt to lure away Porsche 911 buyers and those who actually... I guess there's some 911 buyers that actually use that back seat. I don't know of any that actually put human beings back there, but maybe there are some, and that's a really big selling point for them. I don't know. I feel like the F-Type's cooler without it, and we do know that they're working on like an XK replacement. I think that would be a better 2+2 than the F-Type, which could be a little smaller and, more focused with just a two-seater configuration. But anyway... some better news from Jaguar Land Rover is they announced this past week that they're going to be offering Apple CarPlay and Android Auto starting with their 2019 model year vehicles, at least some of them. They didn't get super specific, but they did say that it would be available on the upgraded Pro infotainment systems and Pro Duo infotainment systems on Jaguar and Land Rover products, but it would they're going to charge $280 extra for the functionality. Which is, all the other premium brands seem to be charging for it as well, which is just insane to me considering, Kias get it for free, and it just makes no sense. I guess they figure people have the extra money to spend, so why not gouge them for it? But it would have been nice if Jaguar kind of said, hey, we'll be the one that offers it for free, but they're not. They're just going along with the rest. But it's great they're offering it finally because they're one of the last companies to finally adopt this. So I'm just relieved they're finally going to offer it. They do say also that if you're a current owner of a Jaguar Land Rover product that has that new upgraded infotainment system in the past year or two, I think, you can also do a software update and get it as well. Now, I'm not sure how much that would cost or how, if it would cost anything at all. But that's also cool that, even if you don't want to buy a new one, you already bought one in the past year or two, you're not going to miss the boat, hopefully. So that's cool to see. Speaking of Porsche a minute ago, though, there's a couple stories here about Porsche this past week. The first is Car and Driver has given us some info that they've heard, this isn't confirmed, but info from them about when we can finally see the new 911, the all-new one, and when it's going to be available. So they claim it's going to be revealed at the LA Auto Show at the end of next month, with the cars arriving on sale here in the U.S. Next summer, they're saying. The first to arrive is going to be the Carrera S and the 4S with PDK. Then the convertible versions of those will also be coming next summer. A little later in 2019, they're going to have the regular Carrera and Carrera 4. They're going to be coming both with manual and PDK, as well as manual versions of the S models. So the manual will be available across the board still, I think. So that's good. Lastly, they said the Turbo model will actually be coming by the end of next year as well. So that's pretty cool. They're going to have a fast rollout for those. But they did say the Targa GTS and GT3 versions will have to wait until 2020 to see those on sale at least. And so speaking of the GT3, though, that was actually just spied this past week, and it shows first and foremost a massive and chunky rear wing there that to me doesn't look production ready. Those wing supports are just way too huge and rough looking to be a production thing. So I think they're just kind of testing how high they want the wing to go and adjusting that maybe, because I think, again, if this isn't going to be on sale for another year and a half, then they have plenty of time to tweak all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, you can see the other signature traits like the center dual exhaust there, the wider fenders up front, and more aggressive bumpers as well up front there. It's all, is still nicely hidden behind the camo, so we can't make out a lot of the details, but it does look like it's shaping up very nicely. And the last few stories this week are several other vehicles that were spied, thanks to my spy photographer, Brian Williams. So the first here is a possible BMW M2 CS or GTS version that was spied on the Nürburgring, running around with some more aggressive wheels there, a more aggressive front lip, which you can see some of the camo coming off to expose the black portion of it there to show just how aggressive it could look, and also a rear lip spoiler that's a little higher than I think you usually get on an M2. And so there's no other details or rumors yet on what this could offer. Any kind of M4 motor is certainly possible with higher horsepower or something, but who knows? We just looks like they're testing something, and so that's cool to see. BMW was also spied testing a refresh for the X1, and it doesn't look like it's going to change much. Just tweaks to the front and the back there to kind of make it look similar to the new X3 and stuff. And there's also going to be updated interior components almost certainly to, again, bring it in line with those newer models. And And while we only get one engine with the 28i version here in the US, there's a rumor we could also get one of the less powerful engines for a sub 200 horsepower model to kind of bring the pricing down a little bit on the X1 to make it better competing with the others. So anyway, cool to see that. Audi was also spied testing a new A6 Allroad, and you can tell it's the Allroad version because it's sitting up a little bit higher than a regular A6 Avant, and it seems to have some extra trim around the fenders, maybe slightly wider fenders, a little bulkier looking, although it's very minor, but it does look like it is, you know, obviously going to be the all-road version, which we expected anyway. The interior and mechanicals will almost certainly be identical to the A6 Avant, and so anyway, cool to see that. And the last spy shots of the week here are of the new Cadillac XT6 that we're seeing for the first time with just the camo wrap for the most part here. So this is going to be a 3-row crossover based on the Qi platform, and it's going to be positioned in between the XT5 and the Escalade. So you're going to have that 3-row capability like the Escalade, but you're going to have, you know, the smaller size, not have a V8 or anything like that. This is mostly designed to compete with the Acura MDX, Infiniti QX60, and the Audi Q7. And so there's still lots of camo, but it does look good. It looks like it's going to get very similar headlights and taillights to what we saw in the new CT6 refresh. With, you know, those lights that kind of go one direction but then go down the other and kind of create like a 90-degree angle. And so I think that's what you're going to see most likely on here. And it makes sense if the CT6 and the XT6 share very similar styling. That would totally fit. You know, lots of other companies are doing the same type of thing. The engine is most likely going to be the GM corporate 3.6 liter V6 engine, but I think a 2-liter turbo version is certainly possible, or maybe even that 2.7 liter out of the Silverado maybe, although they'd have to probably refine it a little bit for Cadillac's application. But you know, GM's fine using corporate engines across brands, so you know, something like that could be possible as well. But anyway, this is rumored to be revealed in Detroit. Again, that sounds maybe a little soon, but we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, cool to see that. But yes, that's it for all the news this week, guys. Let me know your thoughts and everything in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Take care.